What if I told you that all the men you've chosen in your life have something in common with your father? Could you accept that truth? There's a deep psychological connection between how you relate to men now and that first male relationship that shaped your perception of love, protection, and presence. I know how it feels to carry that confusion in your heart when you look at your relationships and wonder why the same thing always happens. Why do you attract emotionally distant men if your father was absent? Why do you get involved with controlling men if you grew up under his rigid authority? Why do you accept crumbs of affection if you learned that male love comes in small, conditional doses? You're not imagining patterns that aren't there. They're real, and they have a very specific origin. One of the greatest scholars of the human psyche revealed something revolutionary about how our first relationship with the masculine determines all the others that will follow. Carl Jung discovered that we carry within us an unconscious image of what it means to be a man, and that image was sculpted in the early years of our lives through our relationship with our father, or with his absence. And until you bring that image from the unconscious into consciousness, you'll keep repeating the same patterns, attracting the same types of men, experiencing the same frustrations. Your feminine energy is too precious to be wasted trying to heal in others what wasn't healed in your relationship with your father. And today, you're going to discover how to break this ancestral cycle and consciously choose the kind of love you deserve. There's an invisible mirror that you've carried within you since childhood, and reflected in it is the very first version of masculinity you ever knew. For most of us, that first version was our father, not just the man who brought us into the world, but the archetype of the masculine that we learned to recognize, to fear, to admire, or to long for. Depth psychology teaches us something fascinating. As a child, you can't separate your father's behavior from the very essence of what it means to be a man. If your father was silent, you internalized that men are naturally closed off. If he was explosive, you learned that male anger is something to be feared or controlled. If he was always working, you concluded that men show love through providing, not through presence. And here's what so few women truly understand. This internal image of the masculine doesn't just vanish when you grow up. It becomes the unconscious blueprint that determines who you find attractive, who sparks your romantic interest, and most importantly, what kind of male behavior you consider normal in a relationship. Look back at your past relationships with honesty. Can you identify any traits of your father in the men you've chosen? Maybe it's not obvious at first glance. Maybe your father was present and you find yourself drawn to men who are absent. Or perhaps he was critical, and you attract men who never give you a compliment. Sometimes we repeat exactly what we know. Sometimes we run to the opposite extreme, but we rarely make truly free choices. The truth is, your heart is always trying to work something out through your relationships. If your father didn't know how to love you properly, you might spend your whole life trying to get from other men what you didn't receive from him. If he loved you in a suffocating way, you might run from any man who shows you genuine affection. This doesn't mean you're doomed to repeat the past. It means that until you understand how your father shaped your perception of the masculine, you'll be reacting to the present through the lens of the past, choosing men not for who they are, but for what they represent in your subconscious. Our relationship with our father is the first school where we learn about power, protection, authority, and masculine presence. It's where we develop our ability to trust men, to feel safe in masculine energy, to understand what kind of space we occupy in a man's heart. If your father saw you, really saw you with eyes that recognized your uniqueness and value, you probably developed a healthy expectation of being seen by men. But if he looked at you with eyes that judged, that compared, that conditioned love on performance, you may have learned that you need to constantly strive to earn masculine attention. The presence or absence of a father shapes not only how we see men, but how we see ourselves in relation to them. A girl who grew up with a present and loving father develops an inner security that makes her feel naturally worthy of masculine love. A girl who grew up with an absent father may carry a thirst for masculine validation that leads her to accept any crumb of attention. Jung taught us about something called the father complex, a collection of unconscious emotions, memories, and expectations related to the paternal figure that influences all our future relationships. This complex can be positive, when the father was a nurturing presence, or negative, when he was a source of wounds or abandonment. But here's something crucial that many women don't realize. Even a good father can leave limiting marks if he didn't know how to honor the feminine nature of his daughter. A father who always tried to protect you from the world may have created in you a perception that you're too vulnerable to take care of yourself. A father who only valued your achievements may have taught you that your worth lies in what you do, not in who you are. And then there are the fathers who simply weren't present, physically or emotionally. They leave their daughters with a hunger for masculine presence that can manifest as a tendency to accept emotionally unavailable men, as if unconsciously trying to make these men stay, unlike the father who left. Mature feminine energy understands that it's not the responsibility of current relationships to heal the wounds left by the father. But it also understands that until those wounds are recognized and integrated, they will continue to unconsciously determine your choices in love. Let's translate this into practical situations you can recognize in your own life. How do your father patterns show up in your current relationships? How can you identify when you're reacting to the present through the lens of the past? First, be aware of your emotional triggers with men. If you have a disproportionate reaction when a man doesn't text back quickly, you might be reliving the anxiety of a child who never knew if her father would be there when she needed him. If you become controlling when you feel a man pulling away, you might be trying to avoid re-experiencing your father's abandonment. Also, notice what kind of male behavior you find attractive. Are you more interested in men who are emotionally unavailable? That might be your subconscious trying to win the challenge your father presented. Do you feel suffocated by men who openly show affection? Perhaps that's because you never learned how to receive healthy male love. Observe your communication patterns in relationships. Do you have difficulty expressing your needs because you learned that bothering your father had consequences? Do you become excessively submissive or rebellious? Both can be reactions to a father who didn't know how to balance authority with love. A powerful strategy is to do a mindfulness exercise. Before reacting emotionally to something a man does or doesn't do, pause and ask yourself, is this reaction proportional to what's happening now? Or am I reacting to something from the past? That simple question can begin to separate the present from the wounded child who still reacts within you. Also, practice observing your unconscious expectations. Do you expect men to read your mind the way you wish your father had? Do you assume they'll disappoint you because your father did? Or maybe you idealize men too much because your father was your hero and no one else can measure up. Remember, recognizing these patterns isn't about blaming your father or playing the victim. It's about reclaiming your freedom of conscious choice. When you understand how the past influences the present, you can start making choices based on who you are today, not who you were as a child. There's this intricate dance between the father wound and how you relate to your own femininity. The way your dad reacted to your feminine energy, your sensitivity, your intuition, your emotions, your creativity, has deeply shaped how comfortable you feel expressing those parts of yourself with other men. If your dad was okay with your tears, your emotional outbursts, your cyclical moods, you probably developed a natural confidence in showing your vulnerability to partners. But if he was uncomfortable, impatient, or critical when you expressed your emotions, you might have learned to hide or suppress your feminine nature to keep the peace in relationships. Think about how you behave when you're in love. Do you allow yourself to be seen in all your emotional complexity? Or do you try to stay balanced all the time so you don't scare your partner off? Do you express your feminine needs, like the desire for romance, deep emotional connection, ritual, and beauty? Or do you try to be the cool girl who doesn't need any of that? Your relationship with your dad also determines how you handle male authority in relationships. If your dad was too authoritarian, you might rebel against any attempts at male leadership, even when it's healthy and protective. If he was too passive, you might get frustrated with men who don't take initiative or make decisions. There's also the issue of trusting in male provision. If your dad was financially unstable or used money as a way to control you, you might have developed an excessive need for financial independence that makes it hard to receive material care from a partner. If he was generous and stable, you might have unrealistic expectations about what men should provide. Sexuality is also deeply influenced by your relationship with your father. A dad who honored his daughter's femininity without sexualizing her creates a woman who's comfortable with her own sensuality. An absent father can leave a woman searching for male validation through sex. A dad who is uncomfortable with his daughter's sexual development can create blockages in her adult erotic expression. But maybe most importantly, understand how your relationship with your dad affects your ability to trust in male protection. If he made you feel safe in the world, you can probably relax in the presence of a trustworthy partner. If he made you feel vulnerable or exposed, you might always be on guard, unable to truly surrender, even with men who are worthy of your trust. Here we arrive at the deepest shadow of this discovery. The possibility of spending an entire life trapped in unconscious patterns, always choosing the same type of man disguised as different people, reliving the same dynamics, feeling the same frustrations, without ever realizing you're dancing to a tune you learned in childhood. Some women become addicted to trying to fix emotionally unavailable men, not realizing they're trying to heal the relationship with a father who was never truly present. They choose men with obvious problems, addictions, emotional immaturity, unresolved trauma, and spend years trying to love them back to wholeness, believing that if they can just manage to do it, they'll have finally proven they're worthy of a man's love. Others become controlling in relationships, micromanaging every aspect of their partner's life, unaware they're trying to avoid reliving the feeling of powerlessness they felt as a child in the face of an unpredictable or absent father. They believe that if they can control everything, they'll never feel abandoned or disappointed again. Then there are those who sabotage themselves whenever a relationship starts to get serious, picking fights or withdrawing just when the man shows genuine interest. They might be repeating the pattern of a father who abandoned them, proving to themselves that men always leave anyway, before the other person has a chance to leave first. And then there are the women who become invisible in relationships, silencing their own needs and desires to keep the peace, just as they did with a father who couldn't handle any form of conflict or intense emotional expression. They learned that love means silencing themselves. The danger is that these patterns can perpetuate themselves for generations. A woman who hasn't resolved her relationship with her father can pass on to her daughters the same thirst for male validation, or to her sons the same inability to honor the feminine. What began as a little girl's wound can become an entire family's legacy. But perhaps the most tragic thing is when a woman resigns herself, deciding that all men are the same, or that true love doesn't exist for her, not realizing she's looking at the world through the lens of a specific experience that can be healed and transformed. She gives up on the possibility of experiencing a different kind of love because she can't imagine anything beyond what she's known. The transformation begins when you can separate your father from all other men. When you understand that he was just one example of masculinity, not the definition of it. When you realize that the men you choose might reflect your inner patterns, but don't have to repeat them forever. The first step is to make peace with the truth about your father, not the father you wanted him to be, not the father you imagined as a child, but the man he truly was, with his limitations, wounds, and strengths. This doesn't mean forgiving him or justifying harmful behaviors, but stopping the drain of emotional energy, fighting a reality that's already in the past. Practice distinguishing between present-day reactions and echoes of the past. When you feel angry at a partner for something he did, ask yourself, is this anger about him or about something my father used to do? When you feel afraid of being abandoned, question, is this fear based on his current behavior or on the memory of when my father left? Start consciously observing what types of men spark your attraction, and question whether that attraction comes from a healthy place or an unhealed wound. If you're always drawn to men who need to be saved, you might be trying to save your father through them. If you're only interested in men who are hard to win over, you might be trying to win a competition that started in childhood. A powerful practice is to write a letter to your father, one you never have to send, where you express everything you never said. The anger, the sadness, the gratitude, the unmet requests, the needs he couldn't fulfill. Allow yourself to feel all of it without judgment, so these emotions no longer need to seep into your current relationships. Also, develop a conscious relationship with healthy masculinity. This might mean seeking therapy with a male therapist who can model nurturing male presence, cultivating friendships with men who demonstrate integrity and emotional maturity, or simply observing examples of healthy masculinity in the world around you to expand your perception of what's possible. Most importantly, Learn to be the father you wish you'd had for the inner child who still lives within you. Offer yourself the safety, protection, validation, and unconditional love you sought from him. When you stop needing men to heal your father wounds, you can choose them for the joy and expansion they bring, not for what they can fix in you. When you finally understand how your father shaped your view of men, something deep inside you shifts. You stop reacting to men and start truly responding. You break free from unconscious patterns and begin making conscious choices. You let go of trying to heal the past in the present and begin creating something genuinely new. The woman who releases herself from those paternal patterns develops a keen sense about a man's energy. She can quickly feel if he's emotionally available, or just pretending, if he's capable of real intimacy, or simply repeating learned behaviors, if he honors the feminine, or if he fears it. This transformation also deeply affects how you relate to your own femininity. When you're no longer trying to adapt to the emotional limitations of a wounded father, you can finally express your feminine nature in all its complexity. Your intuition, sensitivity, creativity, your cyclical nature, your need for beauty and deep connection. You start attracting a different kind of man, those who aren't afraid of your emotional depth, who celebrate your femininity instead of trying to control it, who are genuinely interested in growing alongside you instead of maintaining stagnant dynamics based on rigid roles. Your relationship with your own father can also change. When you stop needing him to be different than he is, you can relate to him with compassion instead of neediness. You can see his limitations as reflections of his own unhealed wounds, not as a judgment of your worth as a daughter. There's immense freedom in realizing you're not responsible for healing the masculine wounds of the men around you, just as you weren't responsible for healing your father's wounds. You can offer love, support, and understanding, but healing is always each person's own responsibility. And perhaps the most beautiful transformation is the ability to honor both the masculine and the feminine within yourself. When you embrace the positive aspects you learned from your father, perhaps determination, strength, logic, without carrying his limitations, you become a complete woman, capable of truly balanced relationships. That's the sacred dance between the masculine and the feminine. Not a search for wholeness through another, but an encounter between two whole beings who choose to create something beautiful together, free from the ghosts of the past and open to the infinite possibilities of the present. Now let's move into a practice to help you integrate this understanding into your life. Find a quiet space where you can be alone for a few moments. Sit comfortably, close your eyes, and take a few deep breaths, allowing your body to completely relax. Bring to mind the image of your father, not as you wish he was, but as he truly is or was. Notice the emotions that arise without judging them. Perhaps gratitude, perhaps anger, perhaps sadness, maybe a mixture of them all. Just allow these emotions to exist within your body without trying to change them. Now, with your hands on your heart, silently say, I acknowledge how you shaped my perception of masculinity. I honor what I learned from you, and I release what no longer serves me. I consciously choose how I want to relate to men from this moment forward. Visualize yourself in your upcoming interactions with men, whether they're romantic, professional, or friendships, responding from your adult wisdom, not from your childhood wounds. See yourself setting healthy boundaries, expressing your needs clearly, choosing only men who honor your feminine energy. End this practice by placing one hand on your heart and one on your womb, connecting with your feminine essence, independent of any masculine validation. Breathe in this sense of wholeness and carry it with you throughout your day. The truth about your father's influence on your relationships isn't a sentence, it's a liberation. When you understand how the past has shaped your choices, you reclaim the power to make different ones. When you recognize the patterns you've inherited, you can consciously create new ones. You're not doomed to repeat your father's story in your relationships. You're not destined to accept crumbs of male affection because that's what you learned as a child. You don't need to spend your life trying to heal wounded men to prove you're worthy of love. The woman who integrates her relationship with her father becomes free to choose men, not for the ghosts they awaken, but for the light they bring. She can love without trying to save, surrender without losing herself, trust without becoming naive. This is the quiet revolution of the conscious feminine, breaking the unconscious cycles that have perpetuated for generations. and consciously choosing the kind of love you want to experience and transmit. When you heal your relationship with the first man in your life, you open space for relationships that nurture, expand, and honor who you truly are. And so, the wound transforms into wisdom, the pattern transforms into choice, and the past transforms into a portal to a future where you finally find the love you've always deserved, starting with the love you learn to have for yourself.